We're very delighted to have Heather Hansen provide us her background and experience on how to make your voice heard during the legislative process. Heather is, as she says, a WFFA lobbyist, which is a government relations person. She knows the ins and outs of the legislative process like it's nobody's business. She's a longtime professional in that regard. And she's also a small forest landowner, so with property down in Lewis County. So that brings to her voice to the table a very, very strong voice in support of small forest landowner needs. So if there's ever any issues that you have, Heather really is the person that can help frame them and bring them through to as best a conclusion we have as possible. It's not always possible. We're a very small voice in a very large pool. And so with that, I want Heather to start. She wanted to talk a little bit about provide Q&A as she went. And so Heather, I'll let you take it away and I'll mute and enjoy the show. Thanks so much.
Okay. Well, I like to keep things informal. I wish we could do this in person, but obviously we can't. So I was hoping we'd go ahead and have, if you have a question as we go along, just go ahead and ask it. Either speak up or put it in the chat, and I'll try and watch the chat for questions. Okay, let's get going. So who are legislators and why do they do what they do? Legislators are regular people. It can be intimidating to talk to a legislator, but most of them, I'll say most of them, are regular people. They're your neighbors. Some of you are lucky in that you know some of your legislators very well and realize that, but not everybody does. Some are retired, but many of them work full time. They ran for office because they believe they have something to offer. They believe they can help make Washington State a better place. Now, some of them obviously have very different ideas about what would be better or what things they should be spending their time working on. Most of them want to hear from constituents. They want information about what's going on in their district. They want to know what you care about. I am a firm believer that every time you contact a legislator, they ought to respond. Not all of them do, but the good ones do. They can't help you if they don't know who you are and what you need and what you care about. So the first step in making your voice heard is getting to know your legislators. A piece of that is also getting to know staff, because legislators can be incredibly busy. Staff control their schedules. They control meetings. They control the communication back and forth. So, and everybody works a little bit differently with their staff. Some legislators will respond directly to a constituent. Some only go through their staff. So getting to know the staff will help you communicate better with your legislators. And then be a resource to them. I mean, this isn't rocket science. This is just like anyone else. People like people that are nice and friendly and helpful and help make their lives easier. So if you can provide information that's useful to them, that's a benefit to them that's helpful. Now, not everybody wants to get involved in campaigns, and that's fine. You don't need to. But if you so choose, you can volunteer to help out during a campaign. You can give money if you choose. These are other ways of just building a relationship with your legislators, and gives you more access and more opportunity to communicate with them. Remember that in Washington State, being a legislator is a part-time job. So most legislators have a job in addition to the legislature. Scheduling time can be a challenge. Inviting them to speak to a group is one good way to get around that challenge, because they oftentimes don't have time to meet with everybody individually. But if you invite them to speak to your county chapter, then it's a bigger audience for them and more worth their time. Although, again, everybody's different. These are humans with lives of their own. Some legislators are happy with going to evening meetings. Some try to avoid evening meetings because they want to be home with their families. Some will travel to a meeting, some won't. Now that we're doing everything by Zoom, it might be easier to get them to participate in a meeting by Zoom. Tours are a fantastic way to build relationships and share information. Of course, they can be tougher to schedule because of travel and time. Do your homework in getting to know your legislators. Figure out which committees they serve on. They're usually more interested in issues that their committees deal with because those are issues they can have more influence over. Most legislators are on 2 or 3 committees. Occasionally they'll be on 4. If they're in leadership, they may only be on 1 or 2. Every legislator has a bio on the legislative website. I'm going to point out, if you remember only one thing from tonight, remember leg.wa.gov. That LEG, short for legislature.wa.gov. That website, that's the legislative homepage, and you can get all kinds of information from there. From that website, there are links to lists of legislators, and we'll get to that later with more information. Almost all legislators, if not all, have an electronic newsletter. And you can sign up for your legislator's newsletter, the 3 from your district. So let me back up there. Everybody has a senator, 1 state senator, and 2 state representatives. So you have 3 people representing you in Olympia. So you can sign up for those 3 electronic newsletters and learn what they're interested in, what they're working on. That'll also tell you when they're having town halls or other meetings in the district that you can attend. You can also sign up for other legislators' newsletters. Say there's a legislator that isn't yours, you don't live in that person's district, but they chair a committee you're interested in, or they're interested in forestry. Let's use the obvious example here. This is Lewis County, Representative Ed Orcutt represents the 20th district, including all of Lewis County, I think. He's a forester. Now, he deals with a lot of other issues besides forestry, but there may be people who don't live in the 20th district who want to sign up for Ed's newsletter because they're going to get a little bit more about forestry from it. Again, legislators are people, and different legislators prefer different modes of communication. I'll give an example. Ann Rivers is one. You can text Ann this time of night, and she's liable to respond back to you in 5 minutes. She is a great communicator. Unfortunately, she has taken another job and is stepping down from the legislature, and I haven't yet heard who her replacement will be. Some like to talk on the phone, some like email, some won't respond at all unless you show up in person. So this is a great opportunity to ask staff, what's the best way to communicate? Now, the catch to this is not all staff will tell you the truth. And it's not that they're not wanting to tell you the truth, but part of their job is gatekeeper. Part of their job is protecting their legislator so they're not overwhelmed. Once you establish a relationship and they know you and trust you, they'll be much more open to communicating. The first time you reach out, you're a stranger. So staff may tell you it's best to send an email because that's the easiest thing for the staff to manage. Once you get to know the legislator more personally, they may give you their cell phone number and you can text them or call them. That's part of getting to know them. And, we all have to be realistic. They have hundreds of constituents asking for things, often angry constituents who are mad about something, who want things that the legislator has no control over. So be nice, be helpful. Again, human beings. If you're nice, if you're helpful, they'll be more willing to talk to you. You'll establish a relationship. They'll be more open to talking with you in the future. If you get mad and demanding, next time you call, staff's likely to say, sorry, too busy. And it's great to ask, how can I help you? Is there anything I can do for you? And sometimes it's just amazing the answers you get. Most of the time, it'll be, oh, no, but thank you for offering. Every once in a while, you might get somebody saying, well, yeah, I'd really like to know, how do I find out how many small forest landowners are there in Lewis County? How do I find out how many acres of timber there are in Lewis County? And then you can call me or point them in the right direction. Since you mentioned, someone mentioned Representative Larry Hoff, this is a great story about building a relationship. When he was brand new to the legislature, which was just a couple of years ago, Rick Dunning really made him a project and spent a lot of time with Representative Hoff, got to know him very well, took him out in the woods. They walked in the woods together and they talked. Representative Hoff came into the legislature saying, I want to help small forest landowners. I know the background. What happened to you isn't fair. I want to do everything I can to fix it. And he has just been awesome to work with. So that's the best story I know of someone really building a relationship and a friend for life for this whole association. Communicating in writing is always good because, of course, then the legislator has more time to respond. It's more documented. You're more likely to get a response often. When you write, keep it polite, keep it short, focused, to the point. Remember to proofread. It's always a good idea to have somebody else read it over, help proofread, make sure the tone is polite. Again, sometimes it's going to be staff reading the email, assuming this is via email. You can also write real letters too. Sometimes it's actually the member, sometimes it's staff. You're much more likely to get a response if it's short and polite. But when I say that, though, certainly include enough detail so they understand what your concern is, what your position is, and the background information they need to help you. Okay, so where do we go to find information? My favorite website, leg.wa.gov. Hearing schedules, you can find your legislators, their contact information. You can sign up to testify or submit written comments on a specific bill. You can look up and read bills. You can create your own bill tracking list if you're seriously into it. And then another place is TVW. The TVW website, all hearings, practically all government meetings, including the Forest Practices Board, are recorded and on the TVW website. So you can watch live on the website. You can also go to the website and search for past Forest Practices Board meetings or Fish and Wildlife Commission meetings or the Senate Ag Committee last spring, and listen to your heart's content. Okay, these I just clipped, cut and pasted right off of the legislative homepage. So all of the information you can find there. If you spend time looking around on that page, it's amazing what's there. You have links to RCWs, those are laws, and then the agency rules. maps showing districts, all the bills, all the hearings, legislative hearings, schedules, House and Senate member lists. Again, every member has a bio and contact information on their website. See which committees they're on. You can track bills. You can sign up for legislative emails. Okay. So I'm going to stop there before we go on to issues. And said I like to keep this informal. It would be easier if we were in person. But does anybody have any questions about communicating with legislators? And again, the 20th district's lucky because you have not only great legislators, but Ed Orcutt's a professional forester. John Braun owns a lot of forest land. So they get it. They understand the concerns. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't want to or need to listen. They still need to hear from constituents about current issues. Down in Clark County, again, yeah, Representative Hoff does not have a background in forestry. His background is in business, but he is very, very interested in forestry. He wants to hear from small forest landowners. Up in Skagit County, without knowing who they are, I'm going to say most of the legislators up there do not have a forestry background. They care about forestry, so they're interested. That's a great location to really build a relationship and get them thinking more about forestry. Probably a little more emphasis is given to ag issues up there because obviously agriculture is very important too. But building a relationship and talking forestry issues with them would be good. I'm going to go back to the title of the first slide that said, they can't help you if they don't know who you are and what you need. That is the most important thing. And even if you think they already know, you think, oh, my legislators already know about forestry. But do they know what's most important to you right now? Just keeping in touch, not overwhelming them, but keeping in touch, sending an email every now and then saying, thank you for your past work. I'm concerned about whatever's coming up now. Okay, we don't yet have a lot of information about what's going to be coming in 2022 on a legislative front. There are a lot of things going on the regulatory front with DNR. But on the legislative front, they are proposing a bill titled Keeping Washington Green, or Keeping Washington Evergreen, I should say. The intent of the bill is to conserve 1 million acres of working forests and to reforest 1 million acres, and to develop a 20-year natural and working forest conservation and reforestation plan. Now, the bill is still very much a draft. It still has a long way to go before it's introduced, I hope. It's a long, convoluted bill that's very vague at this point. There aren't definitions in it of what conserve means. So the first question that Elaine and I asked was, so you want to conserve 1 million acres of working forests? Is that private land? And if so, what exactly does conserve mean? I don't think we have a clear answer to that yet. So I have no doubt that this bill will take a lot of time in the coming legislative session. Hopefully it will be more focused before we get to January. The 2022 legislative session begins January 10th. This is a short session year, so it's 60 days. It ends, I think it's March 9th. Hopefully you know we have a biennial session. So after an election, we have a long session year. It's 105 days where a new state budget is written. Then this year, the off year, the short session year, in theory, they're not supposed to rewrite the budget. They're supposed to just sort of do emergency things and a few little additions to the budget, but no major projects. Over the years, that has changed, and they continue to add to the short session year. Then, of course, after this session ends in March, we'll have start the campaigns for next year's election. And redistricting will come up in there. And so some of you may be in different districts next year as districts change. Those maps, I think, ought to be coming out fairly soon. I'm going to click to my last slide and ask again, any questions about anything to do with the legislature at all? I'm sure some of you have other interests besides forestry. You go to the leg.wa.gov page and you can look at all of the committees. There may be people who are interested in listening to the education hearings or hearings on other topics. I send out a weekly report during session tracking forestry issues. If there's ever something you're interested in or concerned about that's not on that report, let me know and I can look it up for you. We don't yet know how this year's going to work in terms of being virtual or in person. All the rumors and speculation are that we'll have another virtual session, although interestingly enough, the Capitol building is open for visitors now. The galleries are not open. You cannot get to legislators' offices, but the central part of the building is open and they're conducting tours. So I don't see how they can keep people out of the building, but it remains to be seen what the rules will be come January. So one more time, any questions about anything to do with the legislature?
So since we have a bunch of shy people here, Heather, let me ask a question and maybe that'll get the juices flowing. When you're working an issue, can you explain a little bit the process of trying to work all sides of the aisle and the importance of, how you go about doing that?
Sure. So we have all Democratic control in Washington right now, and that may not change for the foreseeable future. So that means the Senate and the House of Representatives both have a majority of Democrats, and of course, Governor Inslee is a Democrat. In general, now, I'm a big believer in individual legislators. Not all Republicans understand natural resource issues. Not all Democrats don't. In general, the majority of Democrats come from more urban areas of the state. The majority of Republicans come from more rural areas of the state. So the majority party picks the committee chairs. So our Senate Ag and Natural Resources Committee chair is Senator Kevin Vandeweghe from Port Angeles, and his seatmate is chair of the House Ag and Natural Resources Committee, and that's Mike Chapman from SQUIM, I think. It's not typical to have the same district chair both committees, but in this case, there are just not very many people in either of the Democratic caucuses that have an interest in ag and natural resource issues. So that's why we got two from the same district. Senator Vandewey's background is he's actually a professional firefighter. He does not have a background in natural resource issues other than having spent the majority of his life in Port Angeles. Representative Chapman, same, but his family does own timberland. His relatives are small forest landowners. And both of them are very sympathetic to the timber industry because it is so important in their district. So working an issue, first you start with your friends, people that you think it's going to matter to, people that should care about it. Forestry issues, Ed Orcutt, right at the top of the list. He's a professional forester. He understands the issues. He knows who else doesn't understand. Representative Ramos is a more urban Democrat, but he worked for the Forest Service for many, many years. So he is not a, how do I say that? I believe his role in the Forest Service was more administrative. He certainly understands the Forest Service and their view of forestry, which of course is different than the private sector. But he's certainly somebody who has to be in the loop on forestry issues. So, okay, 4 caucuses, House and Senate, Republicans, Democrats. You have to work with all 4. And while it may be Republicans that understand forestry issues better, remember it's Democrats that are in control. Not only do they chair the committees, but they control the agenda. Their leadership decides which bills move and which bills die. So you have to work with all 4 caucuses. You have to help them understand why it's important to the entire state of Washington if something's going to move. Interestingly enough, in spite of COVID, the state budget is very healthy. Tax revenue has just been rolling in. So I would say for the majority of years I have been lobbying, money was always an issue. And if you propose something that cost money, that was a big concern and a good way to kill a bill. At this point in time, the state has so much money, it's more like, how can we spend it all? It's no longer a bill killer. Speaking of money, in the Senate, one of the most powerful senators in the state of Washington is Christine Ralphus, because she chairs the Ways and Means Committee. She writes the budget. Now, the House also writes a budget, but she is in a very powerful role. She is also a small forest landowner. She and her husband recently purchased some timberland in Eastern Washington. However, her perspective and her background leans much more heavily to the conserve and protect side. But it's still nice to have somebody in that role that knows a little something about trees, at least. The process, every bill starts out with a hearing, whichever side it starts on, House or Senate, starts out with a hearing in its subject matter committee. If it's forestry, it would be the Ag and Natural Resources Committee. Once it passes there, so there's a public hearing, and then After the public hearing, the committee has to vote on it. If it passes, if it costs money, it will then go to either appropriations in the House or Ways and Means in the Senate. And it'll have another public hearing there focused on the fiscal aspects of the bill. And it has to pass there. Then it goes to the Rules Committee. And the Rules Committee is procedural. Nothing happens to it there, but it has to go through that step. And that's a place where bills can die if there's controversy. Then it goes to the floor, either House or Senate. Has to pass the floor. There's oftentimes much discussion on the floor. Bills can be amended there again. If it passes there, it goes to the opposite house. If it started in the House, it goes to the Senate. If it started in the Senate, it goes to the House, and goes through all of those same steps all over again. And then if it passes all the steps on the second side, it goes to the governor to be signed. So what did I leave out, Elaine?
You left out that it's a small miracle that anything gets passed.
Well, so it is. And it's designed to be that way. It's designed to be an antagonistic process because think of how crazy it would be if it were easy to pass things. We'd have willy-nilly, laws changing every year, going back and forth. And it's designed to be an antagonistic process to keep things in check. So we don't have laws swinging all over the place. There's more stability. At least that's the theory behind it.
Does that still hold true when you have all three branches in one party? Or does it tend to be a little bit more extreme?
It tends to be a little bit more extreme. There aren't checks and balances. And I'll tell you, doing an all virtual session last year was horrible because people are willing to do things behind a computer screen that they won't do face to face. Plus, it just stifled conversation. I spent all this time talking about communication, getting to know legislators, building a relationship. You want them to trust you. You want them to feel comfortable asking you for information. Well, the same is true between legislators. You have new legislators who've never met. They're strangers to each other. And there's an inherent distrust between parties. So it's tough to work together until they've had time to get to know each other. And I cannot tell you how many times during the last legislative session, I had legislators say, we used to go to the back of the room and get a cup of coffee, and we could stand back there next to the coffee pot and talk and work things out. But when you're never together and you don't have that opportunity to just get to know each other and talk and work things out, it was a much more antagonistic process, and bad things passed. They were not well thought out. Sometimes that can work in your favor. We got some things added to bills that may not have happened if the process had really worked. It was much more of a hodgepodge, and things were not cooked. The term of art we use.
So is this something where you would recommend that people kick up a fuss with their electeds and say, no, we want you to be in session. We think it's more in person. It's more appropriate or more useful to actually have better dialogue across the aisle.
Yeah, I think it is. I can tell you that the Republicans are pushing hard for an in-person session. And I don't like being partisan. It is not my intent to be partisan at all. It's just kind of where we are. That both House and Senate Republicans have asked for an in-person session. Democratic leadership is following Governor Inslee and more inclined to stay away and stay all virtual. And then, of course, we have the issue that we do have a handful of legislators that are not vaccinated. And the committee that sets the rules for the Capitol campus, which again is majority Democrat controlled, said nobody can come into an office building if they haven't been vaccinated. So we have legislators that can't get to their own offices because they haven't been vaccinated. And that's frustrating.
Hmm.
My own personal opinion, I wish they'd get vaccinated and then they could go to their offices and we'd solve that piece of the puzzle, but not my decision to make.
Right. Well, if there are no more questions, I think we've had Heather on the hot seat for, good 45 minutes, and it's been very, 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 very informational and helpful. And every time I listen to you, I learn something new as well. So I want to thank you. Oh, there is one question from Ken. And I want to thank you for doing such a good job here.
Yeah, I just want to say to anybody that's interested in kind of dabbling around and getting their feet wet that hasn't done it before, to work with Heather. She can help set up meetings. She kind of greases the skids for you. And I found it to be quite helpful and quite comforting and calming my fears and stuff. So she's a great resource. She's highly thought of by all legislators. So if she's trying to help you get an appointment, you got an even better chance. So thank you, Heather.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Ken. I appreciate that. And I'm just going to say one more time, there are a million things going on during a legislative session, and I don't know how on earth legislators keep track of it all. And so, if you're thinking, well, I'm not really sure I have anything important to share, I don't know if I want to take up their time. Hundreds of other people are taking up their time. We have important issues. Timber is important to this state, and managing it properly is important to this state. And in the districts you live in, it's a very important issue. So take their time. Make sure they don't forget about the timber industry. Don't get lost in the crowd of everybody else. At the end of the day, those who show up are those who get heard.